When working with a deaf-blind individual, you may be called upon to act as a sighted guide. Many deaf-blind people travel independently using a mobility cane, a guide dog, or their residual vision. They remain safe and efficient travelers by previewing their environment and making appropriate decisions. While you are working, there will be times when a deaf-blind person is in a new and unfamiliar place, and the most efficient way to access the surroundings will be a sighted guide or human guide. When your role expands to include sight guiding, it is important that you have the knowledge and training to perform this task with the utmost care and safety. Standard sighted guide techniques were developed almost 50 years ago in the professional field of orientation and mobility, O&M. Many deaf-blind individuals have received training from an O&M specialist and have learned the strategies to effectively travel with another person. By following the standard practices that are taught to deaf-blind people, you and an individual can become a successful team traveling through various environments and situations, allowing full access for the deaf-blind person. It is important to remember that all final travel decisions rest with the deaf-blind individual. Travel partners must have open communication and express their concerns or limitations. If a guide and follower have issues regarding safety, they must use negotiation and common sense. The basic concepts for guiding are simple. An individual, called the guide, with the visual capacity to effectively preview and navigate the environment safely, will position him or herself in front of the deaf-blind person, known as the follower, and beside the arm and hand that the follower prefers to use for grasping. The guide offers the appropriate arm to the follower. The follower remains about 1/2 step behind the guide and grasps the guide's arm just above the elbow. The proper grasp is the thumb on one side of the guide's arm and 4 fingers on the other. The guide's arm remains extended down and relaxed. This allows the follower to interpret information from the movement of the guide's arm. In this way, the team begins to walk. By holding the guide's arm in the proper position, the follower can detect the forward movement of the guide as he walks, turns left or right, or steps up and down. And with this information, both partners cooperate to ensure safe and efficient mobility. There are some basic and common sense rules to follow when performing sighted guide. These rules are important to remember. Always respect the position of the deaf-blind traveler. The deaf-blind individual chooses the left or right arm for grasping. The guide should adjust his or her pace to the speed preferred by the deaf-blind person by attending to the tension on the arm. When the pace is correct, the guide will not feel pulling or pushing on his or her arm. The deaf-blind follower maintains a firm grasp that is not so tight as to become uncomfortable to the guide. Obviously, contact between the guide and follower should be constantly maintained while moving. A guide should never abandon the deaf-blind traveler in an open, neutral space. When the guide and follower decide to separate, the deaf-blind individual should have a wall, pole, seat, or another anchor that allows them to know where they are and to remain safe. Safety is a primary concern, and the guide should not enter travel situations if they are uncertain or unable to ensure the security of the follower. The guide should always move forward into space that has been previewed. Walking backward or moving in a way that causes the follower to walk backward can be dangerous. Remember that you span twice your normal width when walking in standard sighted guide position. Be aware of upper body and head hazards along your route, especially when walking with individuals taller than you. If the travel team can communicate by spoken language, then communication between the guide and follower can be helpful during sighted guide. While it is possible to communicate visually or tactually when guiding an individual through open and unobstructed space, the guide and follower should usually focus on their safe and efficient movement. Tactual communication should be kept to a minimum when moving in any environment that presents a challenge or is potentially unsafe. If there is an important reason to communicate, the guide and follower might decide to stop moving until communication is complete. The guide should be sensitive to needs and desires of the deaf-blind traveler. Some individuals are very experienced at using a human guide, and for others this may be a new experience. The guide should adjust his techniques and pace with this in mind. The simplest sighted guide scenario is walking in a place that is wide enough for two people and does not change elevation. The follower grasps the guide's arm above the elbow and maintains their connection as the guide moves forward. Remember that the guide must continually preview the environment, anticipate changes along the route, and successfully relate information to the deaf-blind person through the movement of his or her body and arm. The guide turns by continuing to move forward and allowing the follower to feel the turn at the guide's arm. The first challenge the guide and follower may encounter is a narrow space. This may be an open door, a crowded sidewalk, or any place that does not allow enough space for two people to walk through when traveling side by side. When faced with this situation, the guide initiates sighted guide narrow space techniques. While still moving, the guide brings his guiding arm behind him, resting it in the small of his back. At the same time, the follower will slide their hand down the guide's arm and secure a grasp on the guide's wrist. This will cause the team to align single file, making the space necessary to travel only as wide as a single person. To be sure that the guide and follower's feet do not become entangled, the deaf-blind traveler extends his arm to increase the amount of space between him and the guide. When the team has passed through the narrow space, the guide moves his arm to its natural position at the side of his body, and the follower returns their grasp to the position above the elbow on the arm. Another common situation that requires special consideration and care is when the travel team encounters a change in the elevation of the surface, like steps, curbs, or other changes. The guide should anticipate the upcoming change in the surface. It is best to approach curbs and steps straight on, at a 90-degree angle. As the travel team approaches the change in elevation, the guide stops. This pause signals the follower to predict a change in the surface. After stopping briefly, the guide steps up or down and visually checks that the follower's footing is secure. In the case of curbs at street crossings, the guide stops, steps, and checks that the follower is safe and stable. The guide then moves forward and the follower detects that they are again on a level surface. For steps, additional consideration is necessary. After approaching the top or bottom step, the guide stops. In an unknown environment, the follower may not grasp the handrail of the stairway. The guide respectfully prompts the follower to take the handrail. Then the guide and follower descend or ascend the stairs. When the guide reaches the level surface, she again stops, signaling to the follower that there are no more steps. At any change in the surface, including steps, curbs, grass, or rough terrain, the guide should always indicate a change by stopping before proceeding. With an experienced team of travelers, the stop may be a brief pause. A standard closed door can open one of 4 different ways: away from the travel team to the left or right, and toward the travel team to the left or right. There are various ways to deal with closed doors, and deaf-blind travelers may have a preference for different techniques. It may be best to follow a simple rule. If the guide can control the door swings toward the guide. He or she should open the door and hold it open with an extended arm until the follower is completely through the doorway. If the door swings toward the follower, the guide will hand over control of the door by using his hand to lead the follower's free hand to the door. The follower will then control the door until he is through the doorway. Another way to remember this technique as you approach the door is if the handle or knob is on the same side as the guide, then the follower controls the door. If the door handle is on the side of the follower, then the guide will control the door. Please watch these demonstrations and take note which way the door opens, on which side the door handle is located, and who controls the door as the travel team passes through. It is safer and easier to avoid revolving doors. Standard swinging doors are almost always available as an alternative. Some deaf-blind travelers do prefer to use revolving doors. To use most revolving doors, you will need to effect narrow space position and move carefully as you proceed through. Escalators pose potential dangers for all travelers, with or without vision. And again, it is best to avoid using them if you are not an experienced sighted guide traveler. In most places with escalators, elevators or stairways are an available alternative. If you are in a situation where you must travel on an escalator, caution and common sense must be used. If you are unaware of the deaf-blind individual's preference for elevators, stairs, or escalators, stop, explain the options, and ask the deaf-blind individual which is preferred. If the choice is an escalator, approach the escalator and stop before proceeding onto the moving steps. Allow the follower to lightly touch the moving handrail to determine the approximate speed of the escalator. Bend your arm and allow the follower to secure a firm, full hand grasp around your arm. As you proceed onto the moving step, you must visually detect that the follower's foot has successfully and safely set down onto a full step. The guide must use the handrail, as does the traveler. Be prepared to support the weight of the follower if balance is lost. As you approach the end of the escalator, step off the moving step and indicate by your body and arm movement that you have reached a level surface. Proceed away from the escalator to avoid pedestrians behind you who are exiting the escalator. Elevators usually do not present problems. The guide uses the call buttons and floor buttons and leads the follower in and out of the elevator. Narrow space position may be necessary, and the guide should be aware that the elevator doors may close prematurely and must be held open manually. Some elevators offer wall-mounted railings or hand grips that can be used when available. When guiding an individual to a chair, the guide should stop so the follower is within arm's reach of the seating. Then respectfully guide their free hand to the top of the chair. The follower clears the seat with her hand, ensuring that there are no obstructions, and takes the seat. At car and van doors, the guide again stops within arm's reach, in such a manner that the door can be opened. Depending on the deaf-blind traveler's preference, the guide can either open the door and lead the follower's hand to the roof above, allowing the person to protect their head, or lead the follower's hand to the closed door handle. Each traveler presents a unique combination of experience and skill. Standard sighted guide techniques may need to be modified in order to remain safe. Some of these modifications are: the deaf-blind traveler may choose to use his or her cane when walking with a sighted guide. Some individuals prefer to use their cane so they can preview the surface in front of them. This typically presents no difficulty except when using narrow space technique or at stairs and doors when the follower must use both hands to remain safe. You may wish to discuss this with the deafblind traveler before providing sighted guide. If the follower has orthopedic or balance problems, the guide may need to maintain an arm position bent at the elbow and allow the follower to wrap their hand around the arm. This provides extra support, but may prevent easy passage through narrow spaces and at other times. If the guide and follower have very different heights, then the follower may choose to place his hand on the shoulder of the guide. Again, this modification may be necessary, but may cause difficulty at closed doors and narrow spaces. Some travelers prefer to visually follow a guide. In this case, the guide must walk in a way that allows the follower to remain in visual contact, slowing down, regularly checking that the follower is safe, and being very cautious when approaching crowds, steps, and other dangerous situations. Poor lighting, bright glare, and other environmental factors significantly impact many travelers with vision loss. Some travelers with low vision may use a sighted guide on some routes or for short periods of time, and at other times decide to use their residual vision. It is always the deaf-blind person's decision when and if to accept a sighted guide. Like any new set of skills, a little practice and time will allow you to become a proficient sighted guide. Confidence and comfort will soon come. Remain relaxed, because a stiff or tense body and arm do not provide good information to the follower. Remember that you are in a team travel situation that requires cooperation and mutual respect. If you are uncertain about what to do, discuss this with a deaf-blind traveler or consult an O&M specialist. Good luck and safe travel.